I'm Stacy.
Hey, I'm Steph.
Welcome to Harnessing Your Power,
where we discuss everyday topics to break through the stigma and harness our power through self-mastery.
Tune in every Tuesday to join us in conversation as we dig deep into our minds and get closer and closer to our highest self. Hey Nicole, thanks for joining. How are you doing? How's your day going? How's your day going, Steph?
My day is actually going really well. We actually just finished up an event. Well, they're still kind of going. They're doing some training, but we actually just finished up an event, which is why I'm in a blazer. I feel like I'm not usually so professionally dressed. So yeah, it's been a great day. How's your day been?
It's been a great day as well. It's been really busy, but really productive. So I'm excited.
That's always a plus. Let me turn this down. I feel like this is so bright. Yes.
Oh, Nicole, I'm glad to hear you're doing good, and thank you for your support. So I guess we can go ahead and get started since we had a little delay connecting.
Yeah.
Which honestly, side note, something has to be in retrograde because all of my technology has been giving me difficulties this week. But I'm so excited for today, like I am every Thursday. It's quickly one of my favorite days of the week. But I'm really excited to talk about the power of connection.
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I just, literally the only thing I wanted to say on that was I feel like we sometimes say this often, but I feel like diving into connection and really doing some research on that, I feel like has changed so much perspective. But I'm sorry, continue. I definitely just got ahead of myself.
No, exactly. That's what I was going to say. I kind of said that on my story that every week I'm like, oh, this topic is so perfect for where I am in life and where everyone is, but it just keeps being. And this one especially, actually, we were going to talk about last week, but we both decided we wanted more time to think about it because as we were preparing for this live, both of our perspectives was just changing so much so quickly. We needed some time to kind of like gather what we wanted to say. So to start it off, to be a little interactive, I did want to re-ask the question that I did ask on my poll. Well, first, if you all think there is a difference between a connection and a bond. So if you're listening, go ahead, drop in the chat, just yes or no. Do you think there's a difference between a connection and a bond?
I'm excited to see some of the answers on this. And I was also very interested to see what people voted on the poll. I was definitely wasn't sure. I didn't think it would all be one answer.
Right, same. And I actually reached out to a few people to ask why they voted they did, but no one responded yet because I kind of just posted that. But okay, so Anthony said yes, there is a difference. Steph, what do you think? Do you think there's a difference between the two?
So at first my answer was no, but yes, I do think there is a difference. Oh wait, hi Tristan. I think a bond is something that happens every now and then, like maybe a day out, and a connection is something forever. Oh, interesting. Wow, what do you think?
So I was kind of the same. I was like, I think they're just two words that are referring to the same thing. And as I did a little bit more research to see what other people had to say, and I thought about it, I realized they are different. And that's interesting, Tristan, that you say a connection is something forever, because I agree with that, but I almost have a little bit opposite of a perspective, because to me, a bond is a deeper connection. It's like taking that to the next step. And actually, to throw a little definition in here, I looked up the definition of bond. And it's a very common word. It's used in science and chemistry and like a lot of different things. But in referring to relationships, the definition was to form a close relationship, especially through frequent association. So then that made me think about how you connection feels more instant. Exactly. But that definition made me think about how we say when we're bonding with someone. When you think about like, oh, like when you're like a kid and maybe you go out to breakfast with your dad for some one-on-one bonding time.
Yes.
And that really is just to deepen that connection.
So you said you looked up the definition of connection and bond, and I actually didn't look up the definitions, but I did look up, and I still have it up because I thought it was interesting. Literally, what is the difference between a connection and a bond? Because I was just like, at first, I was like, is it not the same thing? But connect is of an object, to join another object, or to attach, to be intended to attach or capable of attaching, while a bond is to connect, secure, or tie with a bond, to bind. Which I was like,
Hey, Ash.
So I feel like when you said deepening the connection, or like, you know, being more connected, bonding, like how you said father son, I feel like it's more like something is tying that connection together. It's not just the connection, it's something really making that deeper and attached.
Right. And that's what made me start thinking about that, because one thing I read was talking about how it's really common for people to bond over mutual challenges or bond over our hardships. And I think about some of like the people who I really consider so close to my heart, and it's because they have that understanding, or I'm like, yeah, they get it. Like we experienced a similar type of situation. So they really have that type of understanding.
Yes, and I think it's interesting that you said about bonding over hardships, because I also feel like you could connect over hardships, because I feel like when we talk, somebody, I think it was Nicklin, who said, let me see, connection feels more instant. I feel like you can have a connection with somebody without even really knowing them to the core. Like, I feel like, how many times have you been on YouTube or a podcast or even on Instagram, and you're seeing what somebody is sharing of their life and you feel connected to them?
Oh, interesting. Because
yes.
when you first said it, I was thinking about in person, you know, maybe like your server, even if you just pass by a stranger and you smile at each other, that's a connection to me. But thinking about how you can have that type of connection just from having a little insight into someone's life, yeah.
The reason that I feel so strongly about that is because when Ruby and I first started getting into YouTube, I didn't really know what to expect. And so I started watching a lot of YouTubers, and it's so crazy how you almost feel like these people are your friends. They don't know you, they have no idea who you are, but you know so much about them that you're connected to them in some way because you're connected to their life. I literally watched a YouTube when they got divorced, and I was so sad. And like, I don't even know them, but I definitely felt connected to them. There was no bond, but there was some connection. There was some, you know, I knew about them, and I feel like when you're sharing your life on either social media or YouTube or whatever the case may be, you are showing different sides of you. And even us, as we speak, like, people get to see different sides of us.
Absolutely. And that kind of ties into our biological drive for connection. So we have a drive to share our ideas and share our dreams, and we want to be heard, and we want to be understood, and we want to hear other people's. So because you had the same goals as these people having that YouTube page, because you had the goal to make a YouTube page, you felt that connection because they were sharing that part of them. And I actually did some research about this to come with some hardcore science. And the area of the brain that activates when we think that people are like us, or when we think that people can understand us, is called the Rostromedial prefrontal cortex. So it's a specific area within the prefrontal cortex that activates when we think there's a common understanding. And then that drives us to want to share more and hear more about them and connect. And as we continue to share about ourselves, then the temporal parietal tempopardial junction in our brain activates, and that's what allows us to have those super deep connections. So that's interesting to kind of reflect and think about people that I might have met and had one conversation and feel like best friends. And it's because if that conversation was about, you know, I'll just say Ash, because I know she's on here, and we connected like we're best friends from the first time we talked. And it's because the first time we talked, we were talking about our goals and our dreams and our like visions for our lives. So by talking about that type of thing, it activates all those areas of the brain for me and for her, and then together it's that instant connection and friendship.
Wow, I love that so much, and I love that you use somebody from the live, because as you were talking about, or as I was talking about feeling connected to somebody that you don't even really know, I remembered seeing Tristan's name pop up, and I feel like I know like you're on here, but the fact that you interact with us every week, I feel like some kind of connection towards you just because I see your name pop up so often. And yeah, so I thought that was interesting. When you were talking about the biological need for connection, and first of all, thank you for including like some hardcore science in that. I thank you. But I was listening to a talk or a speech, and I thought it was so interesting that when we talk about the biological need for connection, we all know somewhere that we need to be connected with somebody. And I think we are now at a time where people are like, no, I don't need that, or like, I don't need friends, or I don't need this. And I feel like I hear it often, but I was hearing somebody speak, and she was talking about how the need for connection can be more deadly than some of the things that are high killers. So she was talking about heart disease, and there was something else that she spoke on, but she was talking about how if you can think about like a couple that one of them maybe passed away first, an older couple, and then somebody passed away shortly after, and people talk about they died of a broken heart, it's the loss of connection. There is, she was talking about how people die more from depression or suicide, not depression, suicide, than some of these things. And where does that come from? Does it come from the loss of connection? So I thought that was interesting when you talk about that biological need, that we don't even think about the loss of connection. How do you feel when you're not feeling connected? And I think most of us can really talk on that. I'm sure there's been a point in time where we've all felt not connected, and that can have so many different meanings.
Right, and feeling isolated like that makes it difficult to tackle everything else in life. There's one last aspect of the biological part, and that's once we actually establish that friendship or that connection, or when we are having conversation or in social situations, it releases oxytocin in our brain. And oxytocin is also referred to as the love hormone, because it is the thing that it can kind of skip the other steps and be released right away if you kind of have that instant vibe. So that's interesting, because while that is something that makes you feel great to think about, it's a hormone in your body, and all the hormones in your body needs all the time just for your organs to function. Even though it might give you you know, a mental or physical way that you feel like happy or love when you get oxytocin, it does other things in your body too. So thinking about how the main way that is released in our brain is through connection, we can't deny the fact that we need it. And I feel like when we get stuck in a place that we are saying, no, we don't need anyone else or anything like that, we really just need to step back and take some time to connect deeper with ourselves. Because if we're not connected with ourselves first, how can we even connect with others?
I love that. So I have a question. What do you feel like being connected to yourself consists of? Like, what does that mean to you?
Oh, I like that question. To me, it really just means accepting myself. It's part of my self-love. It's not only understanding myself and constantly learning more, but accepting myself as it was. I often think about, or as I am, I often think about, you know, like friendships, and if a friend came to me and said, oh, I kind of messed up and I made a mistake or whatever, how would I act? I wouldn't be like, wow, you made a mistake, you're a horrible person, that sucks. Like, because I know that's going to ruin that connection. I know that's going to not only ruin that connection, but it's going to make them feel really bad too, and probably make me feel bad too. But a lot of times with myself, if I make a mistake or I let myself down, that negative self-talk happens, and then I feel myself not even connected to myself, and that's what, to me personally, can lead to seeking outside things, like just watching TV all day or laying in bed to just totally disconnect. And I think if anything that we've learned through this past year, because we are in a new year, is how much that we need connection. And as much as we might feel disconnected in different ways, there's still ways that we can connect to ourselves and to each other and to nature and to everything. So for me, connecting to myself really is that first step to being able to have those other connections.
I did not even think about it like that when you were talking about having like friendships. So one, I'm really glad I asked that question. But also when I think about, wow, I feel like there's so many things going through my mind, because when you talk about ruining that connection with somebody else, where are we ruining that connection with ourselves? And it's being like, literally self-love is part of self-connection, and I feel like I just made that connection right now. Because to me it was more, hey, are you in integrity with who you are and who you want to be? Are you doing the things to be the person that you want to be deep in your core? But sometimes I feel like, do we even take the time to know ourselves sometimes? And I mean, that's a question for each person on their own. But I feel like I've been in scenarios where I do deeply know who I am. And I feel like I've also been in a place where I'm like, I don't even know what I want right now. And I feel like at that point, I feel disconnected to my higher self, I guess.
Yeah. That's interesting. I can definitely relate to that. So I think one level of our power might come from learning how to maintain that connection with ourselves, even if we're unsure about what we want or there's chaos happening in the world, being able to keep that. Can kind of influence others through our connections.
You froze for like a second, but you're back.
Okay. We did just touch on how we can influence others through our connections. And that is something that I have been thinking about a lot lately, because I have been really grateful for so many new connections in my life and connections I've had my entire life. And I've just been reflecting a lot on the impact and influence I have towards other people. And my professor actually broke it down the best, and he said everything we do in life and everything we put out can either be life affirming or life deprecating. So everything you speak and everything you put out is either building something up and building someone up, or it's tearing something down. So I often like reflect on that. But Steph, how do you go about like maintaining the connections that you have, or kind of just reflecting on the influence that you might have through those connections?
So I was actually at an event, and somebody had said something about, I know a lot of the times, you know, we think about influencers and we think that they're the only people who have influence, but realizing that you are always influencing somebody, no matter who you're around, no matter what you're doing. When you speak, you are always influencing either the way somebody views things or the way somebody thinks. And I have a few different things that have made me think this, but one of the biggest things that I think we briefly, I don't even know, I think we did talk about this, I'm not sure, but maybe very brief. Ash, actually, also, who I think is on here, we were talking about, we've been friends for a very long time, and she texted me right before New Year's, and she was like, I just want to say thank you so much for all that you do. Because of everything that we do, I've been able to pass down goal setting, which we talked about last week, to my son, and he's 10. And the fact that, I mean, I think we asked this on the last one, you had said, I think you said so, but when did your parents ever ask you about goal setting?
Yeah, you did ask me, and I said no.
And I feel like a lot of us haven't had a lot of people ask us about goal setting, but when somebody says, hey, because of the connection that we had, and I've been connected to somebody else, and I've been connected to somebody else, and because of the things that we're doing together, I was able to pass that down. So it's not just the connection that you're having with one person, but it's literally a ripple effect.
That whole
like,
thing.
Can you impact somebody enough to now all of the things that, even like the conversations that we're having here, have impacted me in a way where now I'm not a mom right now, but when I do become a mom, I'm going to be a way different mom than I would have been had I not had certain experiences. So I feel like I am very aware of the way I say things or the way I talk about how I think, because I want to be able to influence people in a way to where it's always building them up versus tearing them down. And then just a quick story. And not really a story, but I feel like one of the biggest things for me, somebody had asked me what being a femme means to me. And for me, that really was the influence that I have on people and their views on the LGBT community. I'm clearly pretty femme presenting, and nobody looks at me and thinks, yeah, that girl's a part of the LGBT community. But to be able to get to know somebody, create some kind of connection, have conversations, have them have an opinion of me, and then when they do find out, oh, you have a wife, now they have a whole different view of what the LGBT community is. Depending on, obviously, like some people already have a great view, but if you don't necessarily have that view, I feel like it is very impactful. And I have seen people think like, I've had people say like, oh wow, like I would have never guessed. And people really do change their thoughts.
Right, because it can open up that new perspective once you kind of have that connection and you've already shared some stuff, so there's already kind of that trust between the two people to some level. Then they learn something new, and instead of maybe judging you on that at first, since you already have that connection, it can really like open their eyes. I can relate to that a lot, and I've experienced that a lot actually with my parents and stuff about like health. And I finally, after years, influenced my mom to start stretching. She has had multiple back surgeries. She recently just had another one, and she has finally started stretching because she has seen that how much it works for me. And obviously that connection between me and my mom is a pretty deep, lifelong connection. So it's a little bit easier to exert influence. But that's definitely interesting. And on the other hand, it also caused me to think about what we can gain from connections and why it is important to be aware of who we're connecting with. Because as much as I would love to, and I do have goals to spread love and positivity to everyone, at a certain extent, I have to consider how deep I want a connection to go with someone if they're at a different place in their life. So have you ever experienced, I don't know how to put this, like, I guess,
I think I know what you want to ask. I think I know what you want to ask, but I'm not sure.
Just say what you think.
So I was thinking more like, and I don't really know how to word the question, but when you talk about not, yes, you want to spread love to everybody, is somebody draining your energy, or is it a mutual energy charge? Are you growing and having a spark out of it, or is it something that's bringing you down? Maybe, is that kind of where you were going with that?
Right, exactly. Exactly.
I don't know how necessarily you would ask, but yes, I feel like the question maybe was, have you ever had a time where you didn't? I don't know.
Forget the question because
that's fine.
But I was getting towards what you were saying and what Tristan just said about having boundaries and having that understanding to be able to have a deep connection with yourself and a deep connection with others. You have to be mindful of the connections that you are creating. But I was talking to my boyfriend, who is in the music industry, if you all do not know, and I just asked him, and actually his other friend, who is also in the music industry, like, out of nowhere, I was just like, hey, like, what's the first thing you guys think of when I talk about, like, connection? And right away, they were both like, wow, connections are everything. Your network is your net worth. And they were just talking about how in the music industry, which I feel like is really common in a lot of different industries, it's difficult to maybe see the progress that you hope to see without having those connections. You really cannot do it alone. I mean, you do hear about people who just post one song and it blows up out of nowhere, but the reality is you have to have connections at different publications where people write articles about you. You have to have connections at the streaming platforms. You have to have connections with the playlist. Like, you have to have all of these different things to even really have a chance. So that just made me think about it a little bit on a professional level, because honestly, it wasn't until recently that I have really felt that my net worth really is my net worth. Because without some new connections that I've had recently, I have not been on Zoom calls with millionaires. But now, from one connection, which is you, it leading to more and more connections and more opportunities. So I really, from my entire reflection, my final, like, overall point where I've landed on connection is that I really see every connection as an opportunity to grow. Whether that's to actually grow my mind, my business, my bank account, whether that's a chance to have a conversation and grow stronger in what I think, and maybe grow in learning how to set boundaries. Whatever way it is, I really think every connection just provides that chance to grow in some way.
Yes. And as we talk about, so you talk about, like, we connected and then you grew different connections. I think back to my first connection in this, like, in our field, in the trading world. And I think back to that process and how I've been so deeply changed, and not just in clearly a lot of mindset, but I feel like I was already into mindset beforehand, but being connected with people who do more or have more. And this is something that I didn't even think I was going to bring up, but I remember having a conversation one day, and we had talked about how being surrounded with people who are doing so much and always motivated can be motivating, but sometimes you're like, whoa, am I doing enough? And I feel like being able to see what other people are doing, being able to see what other people go through and how they've made it to certain places really opens your mind, and it keeps expanding your mind. And I feel like sometimes now, with all the connections I have made, so I got into trading because C-John and Ruby's connection with C-John. And at the time, he was a school teacher, making $600 a month in trading and doing his school stuff. And then to watch his growth, he's now a six-figure earner. He was able to quit his job, and then he was able to introduce me to other people who were creating six figures plus. I remember before this, I didn't even have a goal set to create six figures. Yeah, I knew I wanted to have nice things, and I knew that I wanted nice things, but in my mind, I was like, okay, cool, I'd probably be okay with like an $80,000 job. But to me, people that are doing six figures a month, six figures a week, 6 figures a day, now your mind is expanded in a way where you're like, oh, I can do more. Oh, I have opportunities to speak to this person to where I can, how did you get here? And I think that's where we're also responsible for some of the connections that we have. Are you asking the questions to get that connection? Are you asking the questions to know what you need to do, and really preparing to have connections with people that will help you grow? And I think sometimes I really take for granted that I know $1 million earners, and I feel like that's something that like has become so nonchalant for me. Like, yeah, cool, like he makes that much and like whatever, but it has upped my mind in such a way that I can't settle. And I feel like that is one of the most beautiful things about connection.
Yeah, absolutely. That growth and just letting go of limitations too, because you can only grow so much if you still have that limitation in your mind.
Yes.
Wow. I really like what you said, that, you know, it's our responsibility to make these connections and to foster them. And this comes down to even the friendships that you might have had your whole life. It's, you know, people always talk about, oh, no one texted me, this person never calls me, but did you call them? Do you text them?
It's a two-way street.
It really is.
Yes.
And I love what you said about connecting with people who are in that place where you didn't even know you could go where you wanted to go, and now you do. And I think it can definitely be motivating, but I do also understand how it could potentially be intimidating. But I also feel like that's where connection with self really comes into play. Because if you are deeply connected to yourself and you understand and you trust and you support yourself, you're not going to be comparing where you're currently at to those people. You're just going to be taking it in that motivating way. And, you know, it goes back to that thing I've heard since like middle school when I was hanging out with friends. My mom didn't want me to, but it's, if you walk like a duck and you quack like a duck and you're in a line with a bunch of ducks, you're going to become a duck, or you probably already are a duck.
Yes.
So if I'm on this call with all these millionaires and I'm learning how to speak like them and do what they're doing, eventually I'm going to become that. Versus if I'm spending every day laying in bed, watching TV, texting maybe some of my friends who are just doing the same thing, then where's my life going to go from there? So I think it's really interesting looking at how connection can really elevate your life. And like how different connections, just the power of connection alone. And then if we even think about the power each individual connection has.
Yes. And I feel like sometimes when you talk about the power each individual connection has, like how many open doors are out there that you just haven't, not even knocked on, like literally open that doorknob. Literally just, or even if it's like, obviously if it's an open door, like just walk through it. Like, and I think sometimes we're standing right in front of the door and we're like, we don't know what to do. And I feel like that is literally like connections help guide you to those open doors. And I like that you said something about opening, like opening your mind, or like growing your mind. And it reminded me back to, I don't know if you had watched I think you had missed part of the virtual convention, but in that they were talking about your mind is like a shirt. And once you stretch out a shirt, it's not going to go back to its original form. And same thing with the mind. Once your mind is so expanded, when I was like, it's hard for me to settle for anything other than big things, it's because my mind is so expanded that I can't go back. I already know that it's possible, so why not?
Yeah. Wow. I love that analogy. Because that's true. Because sometimes I feel like once you're on a path to realize you want more from life and you want to take more control of life, and your mind is growing and expanding in all those ways, there might be moments when it's overwhelming and you kind of second guess it and you're like, wait, maybe I don't want all this, maybe I want the easier thing. But I've noticed that when I have those thoughts, my brain is like, no, girl, you've already expanded in this way. You literally can't go back. That I love that. We are coming up on 40 minutes, but we started a few minutes late, and I did have one last question I wanted to ask.
Okay.
You.
Okay.
That is, do you have any ways that you go about creating new connections or looking for new connections? Or do you more so just kind of let them come into your life?
Ooh, that's a little
bit more on the personal sense than the business sense.
For sure. I feel like I am always open to connection. As a matter of searching for connection, I feel like if there is something to connect on, I feel like I'm right in the middle between introvert and extrovert, but I feel like I'm extroverted enough to be able to, and I feel like bartending has played a big role in that. But I feel like bartending has helped me with the art of connection. I'm able to start conversations with people about just about anything, and I feel like I'm just very open to it. Not that I necessarily am going over to somebody and being like, hey, want to connect? Which sometimes, but I feel like I'm more open to the possibility and letting them come. And an example of that is last night I was talking to Maya. We were at the grocery store, and there was a guy who was checking out right next to us, and Maya was like, what is that? And I was explaining to her what it was. All my Hispanics, they'll know. But I was explaining to her what it is and how I cook with it. And the guy next to us, he didn't even, I hadn't even said what it was. I was just explaining it. He turned around and he said, oh, sofrito. And we just started talking, and we connected over food, over a random thing that we were saying out loud and cooking. And he was like, yeah, I'm about to go home, and I'm about to cook this and this and this. And literally we just got each other's Instagram, and I saw he also had a rainbow in his bio, and I was like, oh wow, there was a deeper connection there than I even expected, because we connected on similar, we were talking about and I don't want to call that a hard thing, but similar things that we've had in our lives. So that's kind of how I go about that, but I'm interested to learn about you and how you would answer that.
Yeah, I love that. First of all, food is probably my favorite thing to connect over.
Yes.
And I am not Hispanic, but I am from Florida, so I am also from that culture, and I love sofrito, and I know how to make it myself.
Wow! I actually did not expect that, but I'm not gonna lie, I feel like I expect most people to know, and the fact that Maya didn't, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a side note.
But I'm kind of the same way. And I think I've gone through phases when I've been more open or more closed. And I've definitely seen not only more opportunities, but just more happiness come into my life when I've been more open. So I actually read a study that was analyzing the impact of smiling at strangers and how that does affect our science and our brain, but how that led to different positive things to occur for those people throughout their day. So they didn't really establish a whole connection. They just had a group of people walk around and just smile at strangers, and then somehow did a double-blind thing to check with the people later about how their day went. But that was so interesting to me because, kind of going back to what we started, you can have that instant connection with someone. And when you are just exchanging a look and sharing a smile, that is a connection. And that is something that now I am completely open to. I've always been someone who kind of smiles at the strangers. But now that I know that, it's something that I make it a point to do more often, but also take it a step further. So I cannot tell you how many times I have been in rooms with people and had great conversations, or even met up with them a second time, and I did not even connect and get their Instagram or their phone number. So that is actually something that I'm working on to establish those connections, to actually take it beyond just that first connection and get a contact to be able to create a deeper connection with them. But I'm kind of the same way. I don't really seek it out. I just like to let it come to me. And it's definitely easier to connect over something specific and relatable.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I feel like I have so much I want to say, but we're so far in that I like that. And I do think, going back to when we talk about it's our responsibility, like just creating those connections. Even if it's not, like, even if it's just an Instagram, like, hey, can I get your Instagram? And I feel like when you're sharing, and I feel like you do share a lot of positivity, that not only, now that goes to like the ripple effect. Not only are you now making that connection, but now they're learning the same things that you want to put out there, and now there's a ripple effect. And maybe they have a change of mindset, or they learn something new. So.
Exactly. And that is kind of what one point about the study about smiling at strangers looked at, because another thing they looked at was how if you receive a smile from a stranger, how then that causes you to go and continue your day and start smiling at everyone you then encounter. So,
yes. Okay. Really, really fast. I really want to touch on this heart story because I feel like it was something that really like shifted in something I even possibly would like to do. This mom was talking about her daughter was going to go to another country, and she was freaking out because her daughter, she's leaving, and she was scared that she was going to feel lonely and alone and all these things. And so she put little tokens of home in her suitcase. And when she was gone, she called her mom freaking out because she lost one of them. And in that moment, the mom was like, wow, like, she does feel connected to us just because I left a little heart. Literally just, and it was like this small, like it wasn't even big, because she left a little heart in her suitcase. That was some point of connection to home, some point of connection to her parents. So then later she went to go visit her daughter. I believe it was South Africa that she was in. And she took a whole bunch of hearts with her. And she was passing them out to strangers. And she said she either picked people that looked like they were having a tough day, people she found caught doing something nice, and people who just needed love, or like that there was some kind of connection. And she would say, hey, this is just a reminder that you are loved. Hey, this is just because you're awesome. Hey, this is just because of this. And she was talking about how even just that little token, even just that little heart of just saying, hey, you are enough. Hey, somebody cares about you. Hey, it's going to be okay. People literally would break down crying. And I think that shows a lot about the power of our responsibility of connection, but also having, like, we don't know where their connection meter is at. Do you have loss of connection? All of a sudden somebody connects with you and you're bawling crying because somebody showed you kindness. So that was one of the most interesting things. And so just a reminder to always live in kindness, always be kind. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That was beautiful and a perfect story to end our live with. And I feel like it just reiterates how much we need connection. That, like, psychologically, we are always looking to feel like we are with something or with someone else, whether that is just with ourselves or with someone else. So whoever started crying from that probably had a day where they were feeling all alone, and it just shows how that one little thing. And like Tristan mentioned earlier, when we share about some of our experiences or difficulties or even positive things we go through, and it relates to someone else, it just creates that feeling of community and that reminder that we are all human and we're all experiencing this life together, and there's someone who understands you, and there's so many people who love you, and that's it.
Literally, you're never alone. I feel like that's something that I have learned throughout the way. We're never alone. Somebody's always going through the same things.
Absolutely.
Or similar.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that was a great way to end it. I did have
Yes.
I could talk forever. We always could.
Literally.
But I just ending on that reminder to everyone who tuned in live, and if you're watching this on replay, that you are never alone. And I'm just gonna say this, but you could always message Steph or I if you are ever feeling alone, or if you even want to talk about these topics a little bit more or anything. We're both completely open to connection.
So open. So
thank you so much, Steph, for joining today. You said a lot of amazing things. I know we talked a little bit before, but I was still writing down some of what you said because
yes, me too.
That's why these conversations are so amazing.
Yes, thank you so much for doing these with me every Thursday. It really has become one of my favorite days. Both because of the conversations that we have, but also because of everybody who's on here. Thank you, everybody, for hopping on here and even being on this far, or even if you're watching the recording, thank you for watching the recording. So appreciated.
Yeah, it really is. So we will see you all next week.
See you next week.
All right.
Bye.